So we're going to be going over the process of the light-dependent reaction. So what happens here is there are 6 H2O molecules in here, so 6 waters. We only have 3 for example, but there's going to be 6. So what happens, the first step is photolysis, all right? So the light energy comes in as photons and causes the splitting of the H2O molecules, all right? So oxygen just kind of chills out over here as a byproduct, but these hydrogens now donate their electrons to the reaction center of photosystem 2. And now that these hydrogens don't have their electrons anymore, they're now hydrogen ions, and they're just kind of chilling in here, building up a nice little concentration gradient. So now that these electrons are in the reaction center, the photons come from the light energy down here, and they begin bouncing around and exciting. They enter the chlorophyll, which is a pigment, and begin exciting these electrons. And once these electrons get excited, they begin bouncing from protein to protein until they reach protein cytochrome C. Now this, because the energy from the electrons gets opened up, and active transport takes place. These hydrogen ions on the outside flows against the concentration gradient into the inside of the thylakoid. So now that this is done, we now have a huge concentration gradient of hydrogen ions in here, and these hydrogen ions need to go somewhere. So they move over to ATP synthase, all right, because they're flowing against the flowing with the concentration gradient. They're allowed to just flow out of here, like so. And then once this happens, these hydrogen ions, because they're positively charged, provide enough energy for ATP synthase to phosphorylize ADP, which is ADP bonding with a extra phosphate group, in order to make ATP. Now, not a set amount of ATP is made, it's made whatever's needed in order to continue the light-dependent reaction and get that completely finished, but we'll go over that later. So now, we still have these electrons over here. So these electrons continue bouncing around, but when they reach photosystem 1, they run completely out of energy and they need to be re-energized. So this light does the same thing, comes in here, gets absorbed by the chlorophyll, begins bouncing it all around, charging these electrons. Now these electrons are recharged, so they begin bouncing from protein to protein, and then they reach what's called NADP reductase, okay? So this gives it enough energy to take NADP, which is the same thing as NAD from cellular respiration, but just with the P because of photosynthesis, and bond it with however many free-floating hydrogen ions there are in order to make NADPH. This is now going to be used in the dark reaction or the Calvin cycle or the light-dependent or independent reaction, whichever you prefer. We'll go over that later. So, the product of the light-independent reaction or the light-dependent reaction is oxygens as the byproduct. ATP, there's not a set amount of those because they just make as many as needed with the amount of hydrogen ions there are and the amount of that they need for the next reaction. And NADPH. Now, there's one more step that happens due to the light independent reaction, which is known as cyclic phosphorylation. So basically, that just means there's too much NADPH for the other reaction to continue because they ran out of ATP. So photosystem 1 shuts off, and all the electrons just keep looping back through. So this electron is no longer bouncing this way. It just keeps bouncing back through photosystem 2, like that, and just making more ATP. All right.